What if Britain putting boots on the ground in Ukraine could either stop the war sooner or spark a dangerous new escalation? Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson says it's time to act and the world is watching. This is Power and Policy UK, where we break down the biggest political decisions shaping Britain and the world with clarity, context, and no spin. The political temperature just went up again over the war in Ukraine, and this time it's coming from a former British Prime Minister. In a striking interview with the BBC, Boris Johnson has urged the UK to send non-combat troops to Ukraine now, arguing that Britain should step up its presence and leadership at a critical moment in the conflict. His comments have already sparked debate across Westminster, Europe, and beyond. Johnson's argument centers on sending British troops in non-combat roles, not to fight on the front lines against Russia, but to help with logistics, training, technical support, and coordination. According to him, this would free up Ukrainian forces to focus more heavily on combat operations while strengthening morale and demonstrating that Western support remains firm. Now, let's be clear, this is not a call for Britain to directly enter the war in a conventional sense. Johnson emphasized that these troops would not be engaged in active combat with Russian forces. Instead, they would operate in support capacities, potentially inside Ukraine, to help with areas like equipment maintenance, intelligence coordination, and military training. Still, the proposal is bold, and it raises immediate questions. The war in Ukraine, which began with Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, has evolved into a prolonged and grinding conflict. The UK has already been one of Ukraine's strongest supporters, supplying weapons, training Ukrainian soldiers on British soil, and providing financial and humanitarian aid. But until now, Western countries have been extremely cautious about deploying their own troops inside Ukraine, even in non-combat roles, due to the risk of escalation with Russia. Johnson's position is that hesitation is exactly what Russia hopes for. He has repeatedly argued that the West must project confidence and unity, and that incremental steps often embolden the Kremlin rather than deter it. In his view, sending non-combat personnel would send a powerful political signal that Britain is not wavering and that Ukraine's fight remains a European priority. Supporters of Johnson's stance say that this could strengthen deterrence. If British troops are physically present, even in a limited capacity, it would deepen the UK's stake in Ukraine's security and potentially discourage Russian attacks in areas where foreign personnel are stationed. The idea is similar to how NATO deployments in Eastern Europe serve as a tripwire, signaling collective commitment. Critics, however, see serious risks. Even non-combat troops can become targets. The line between non-combat and combat can blur quickly in a war zone. If British personnel were injured or killed, public pressure for escalation could intensify. Moscow could also frame the move as direct NATO involvement, potentially using it to justify retaliatory actions. The Russian government has consistently portrayed Western support for Ukraine as proxy warfare. Any boots on the ground, regardless of their official role, could be seized upon in Russian state media as proof of direct confrontation. Johnson's remarks come at a time when Western unity faces challenges. Political debates in the United States about military funding, economic pressures across Europe, and war fatigue among voters are all shaping the conversation. By pushing for a stronger British role, Johnson appears to be attempting to reset the tone, urging proactive leadership rather than cautious incrementalism. It's also important to understand Johnson's history with Ukraine.
During his time as Prime Minister, he became one of Kyiv's most vocal international supporters. He visited Ukraine multiple times during the early stages of the invasion, forging a visible partnership with President Volodymyr Zelensky. In many ways, Johnson positioned Britain as a frontline diplomatic backer of Ukraine's sovereignty.
For Johnson, this is consistent with that legacy. He has long framed the conflict as a defining struggle for European democracy and security. In his recent comments, he suggested that failing to act decisively now could prolong the war and increase costs later. But the UK government's current position remains more measured. Officials have reiterated their commitment to supporting Ukraine while also emphasizing the importance of avoiding direct military confrontation between NATO and Russia. So far, British military involvement has been limited to training Ukrainian troops in the UK and other allied countries, as well as supplying advanced weaponry and intelligence support. Public opinion is another factor. While there remains significant sympathy for Ukraine in the UK, appetite for deeper military involvement is more complex. Sending troops, even in a non-combat role, would represent a new phase in Britain's engagement. Lawmakers would likely demand clear definitions of mission scope, rules of engagement, and contingency plans. International reaction would also be critical. If Britain acted alone, it might face diplomatic friction. If coordinated with allies, particularly NATO partners, the move could signal a broader strategic shift. Other European leaders have occasionally floated similar ideas about increased on-the-ground presence for training or support roles, though most have stopped short of formal deployment announcements. From a strategic perspective, the key question becomes, does placing non-combat troops inside Ukraine meaningfully change the balance of the war? Or does it primarily change the political symbolism surrounding it? Military analysts are divided. Some argue that closer integration of Western personnel could improve operational efficiency and speed up training cycles. Others caution that Ukraine has already demonstrated significant adaptability and that additional foreign presence might complicate command structures. There's also the matter of escalation dynamics. Wars often hinge not only on capability, but on perception. If Russia interprets British troop presence as crossing a red line, it could respond asymmetrically, perhaps through cyber operations, increased strikes on infrastructure, or hybrid tactics elsewhere in Europe. Johnson's argument ultimately rests on deterrence through clarity. He appears to believe that ambiguity invites aggression, while visible commitment restrains it. Whether that logic persuades policymakers is another question. What is undeniable is that the debate reflects a broader shift in how Western leaders are thinking about long-term security in Europe. The war has already reshaped defense spending, alliance structures, and geopolitical assumptions. Proposals that once seemed unthinkable, from advanced missile systems to fighter jet transfers, have gradually become reality over time. Could non-combat troop deployments be next? The coming months will likely determine whether Johnson's call remains a headline or becomes a serious policy discussion within government circles. For now, it has reignited conversation about Britain's role, NATO's limits, and the fine line between support and direct involvement. And that's the tension at the heart of this story. On one side, the urgency of helping Ukraine win decisively and deter future aggression. On the other, the imperative to prevent a broader war between nuclear powers.
Johnson has thrown his weight firmly behind the first priority, arguing that strength now prevents catastrophe later. Whether the UK agrees is something we'll be watching very closely. Because if British boots do step onto Ukrainian soil, even in a non-combat capacity, it would mark one of the most significant turning points in Western involvement since the war began. And that would change the conversation everywhere. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll continue to break down every major development as this story unfolds.
You're watching Power and Policy UK. Stay informed, stay sharp, and subscribe for powerful insights on the policies that define our future.